Okay, this is Kyler and I's final project. We had the Asian and Pacific Islander cultural groups. Okay, so when we're talking about the Asian cultural group, we're talking about a person with ancestral origins in the Far East, Southeast Asia, or Indian subcontinent, including India, China, the Philippines, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam, or those who identify their race as Asian, Indian, Chinese, Filipino, Korean, Pakistani, Cambodian, Thai, Bengali, or Ming, as established by the US Census Bureau. When we're talking about Pacific Islanders, we are talking about the group of islands in the Pacific Ocean that are divided into three main regions: Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia. This area is located north and east of Australia and below the equator, but does not include Australia, Indonesia, or Japan. Melanesia includes New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, and Fiji. Micronesia includes Palau and the Marshall Islands, and Polynesia includes Hawaii, New Zealand, and Easter Island. Some historical perspectives when talking about these areas to consider are the Silk Road. This connected China to Korea and Japan and extended through Central Asia to India and linked the East with Turkey and Italy. This was the major trade communication and culture exchange for over 2,000 years. It was the first major trade network of its kind, which set the stage for global connections and economic systems and sharing of culture. Despite changes in routine, remained the pathway for buying and selling of goods and interactions among peoples. It is believed that much of the Western world did not reach the Pacific Islands until the 1500s, but many trace their ancestry to northern Australia, southern China, and other regions of Asia. It's difficult to get a lot of history on the Pacific Islands because they were so isolated for so long, and there was a variety of cultures, languages, and many of those languages are unintelligible to us because they are of indigenous peoples and diverse expectations. However, migration and trade heavily influenced both societies and cultures, Asia via land and the Pacific Islands via ocean navigation. Religion. Asia has a kind of crossing of the three main religions: Confucianism, Buddhism, and Hinduism. Confucianism is all about self-discipline, respect for authority, tradition, and compassionate treatment of others. It can be viewed as more of a social system than a religion due to the moral teachings and transmission of wisdom instead of specific worship. Buddhism follows the Four Noble Truths, being that life involves suffering. Suffering arises from attachment to desires. Suffering ends when attachment ceases, and freedom from suffering is possible by the middle way. The middle way stresses mindfulness and acceptance and balance in life. No singular God, but stresses personal responsibility. Hinduism is based on the divine power and manifests in multiple forms. It's the world's oldest religion, where one follows their duty and moral obligation. They also believe in karma, which is the spiritual consequence for your actions. The Pacific Islands now are the most common religion is Christianity. This is due to a lot of the settlers being European. Christianity is based on faith in God and Jesus Christ and follow the Ten Commandments that follow moral principles and promote devotion to God. The world's largest religion and value morality, discipline, and ethical living. Some of the areas still, though, that are inhabited by indigenous peoples follow more supernatural religious beliefs. In Asia, a lot of their focus is on philosophy and enlightenment, where the Pacific regions generally follow the monotheistic faith via scripture teachings. Some myths and urban legends. These are just, one example from each culture. There is a Chinese myth of the immortal white snake, the legend of White Snake. It's a folkloric tale about love, magic, and fate. Bai Suzhen, a white snake spirit, transforms into a woman and falls in love with a pharmacist, Zhu Zan. They marry and live happily, but a monk named Fa Hai warns Zhu Zan that Bai Suzhen is a demon snake. When Zhu Zan discovers her true form, he dies of shock, but Bai Suzhen revives him with a magical herb that she risked her life to obtain. When asked why she would risk her life to resurrect her now deceased husband, she explains that in a past life, he saved her from being killed when she was just a small snake who was nearly killed by a rock from a person passing by. Their bond was forged in this moment, and she felt compelled to do anything to repay the favor. This legend is an example of the power of love and perseverance in the Chinese culture, while showing the timeless struggle between life and power. It also suggests a deep connection between mortals and immortals with regard to their spirituality. We're talking about the Pacific Islanders. A very well-known legend or tale is that of the demigod Maui, which is very popular thanks to the Disney movie Moana. Although there are many stories and legends surrounding Maui, he is known as a trickster and a cultural hero who ultimately sacrifices himself for the good of his people. One well-known tale discusses how he snared the sun to slow its passage, giving his people longer days. He is also credited with lifting the sky to create, more space on Earth and by pulling the islands from the depths of the sea. Additionally, another version of the sun snaring story describes him tying a noose around the sun and striking it fiercely to weaken its strength, making it move more slowly across the sky. While Maui's myths vary, the common idea is that he is a devoted servant to his people and a legendary hero of the islands. Both stories reinforce the cultural values like community, devotion, and resilience. The Asian specifically love, destiny, and spiritual beings, and for the Pacific Islanders, heroism and their link to nature. Again, these are just one example from each for traditions and celebrations. The Chinese New Year, perhaps one of the biggest celebrations known worldwide, is also known as the Spring Festival or Lunar New Year. It's held between January 21st and February 20th for over 3,500 years. According to an old legend, a mythical beast named Nian would show up on New Year's Eve to eat livestock, crops, and people. To appease the creature and prevent it from attacking, villagers would leave food out for it. The legend says a wise older man discovered that Nian feared loud noises and the color red. As a result, people began hanging red lanterns and scrolls on their doors and windows, while also setting off firecrackers and cracking bamboo to drive the beast away. The legend helped shape the tradition that continues today, as many who celebrate the Chinese New Year continue to set off firecrackers, visit relatives and friends, and watch the dragon and lion dances and enjoy the lantern shows. In the Pacific Islands, Hevia is a celebration that is held in Tahiti in the month of July. It is a celebration of rediscovering authenticity and expressing Pacific culture through various traditions. Dancing was determined to be indecent by Europeans in 1819. The resurrection was enforced again in 1842 and reauthorized in the beginning of the 20th century, but it was still heavily controlled in terms of outfits and gestures that were permitted. The official revival of Hevia was in 1956, and the purpose is to celebrate and appreciate the beauty of traditional dance while sharing cultural heritage, preserving songs, language, traditions, and legends. For many participants, this festival is the most significant event for the native people of the Pacific Islands. Both of these examples of celebrations and traditions help reinforce heritage, which help with cultural identity and a sense of community. Politics of the area. In Asia, we're going to talk about kind of the three major players. In India, the caste system still influences everyday life, although the government constitution has policies to protect the lowest members, and they continue to operate under that constitution, which was developed after World War II. China was heavily influenced by the reversion of Hong Kong and the status of Taiwan. The decay of the imperial system and the rise of communism post-World War II has led to the eradication of the feudal structures and way of thinking. Example, Chinese perception is being hasty to judge and the preference of sons over daughters. There is current development of the state and party over the last 30 years. Japan has a heavy foreign influence. They continue to operate under constitutions developed after World War II and have a fairly high-ranking governance despite falling down in the New World Order. The Pacific Islanders, by the 1870s, European missionaries and residents had eliminated many of the native governments and were under control, in many areas, were under control of European powers or of the US by the end of the century. Many attempted to incorporate chiefdoms into government, but were unsuccessful. After World War II, colonial governments were reorganized, which gave indigenous populations a role in the government. Some have chosen to be commonwealths or free associations with larger countries, and others are now independent. For example, Northern Mariana is a commonwealth of the US, and the Cook Islands chose free association with New Zealand. Many areas have parliamentary systems, but only traditional chiefs may vote and run in the elections. And Tonga has a monarchy. Some main cultural artifacts from each group. In many Asian cultures, there are high emphasis on education, specifically in science and math, and morality within the culture. Arts are very popular. Film in India, as India is is the largest producer of films each year, producing over 2,500. A very popular genre that has made its way to us is the Bollywood. K-pop in Korea, which is traditional Korean song mixed with contemporary pop, hip hop, electronic, and R&B sounds, is a cultural phenomenon which has also reached globally. Dance, both traditional and modern, and then martial arts, the various forms. Another big piece of culture in this area is religion. It is the cradle of the world's major religions and houses many sacred sites, including the Taj Mahal in India, the Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and the Temple of Heaven in China, and the Borobudur Temple in Indonesia. For our Pacific Islanders, language has been kind of resurged. It largely did disappear with early colonization, but has been revitalized due to efforts started in the 70s, and many native languages have made their way into like the public school education systems. Sea navigation has always been a big piece of life for these islanders, but the double-hulled voyaging canoes, which is kind of showcased in the movie Moana, is making a resurgence as people have shown interest in this sort of dated way of navigation. Another thing that's very key to the culture for the islanders is an interest in the supernatural, a continuing of reality, and defining our relationship with the universe and society. This was reflected in the Tale of Maui. Current issues. In Asia, a big issue is just the amount of people, especially the growth of India and China. China's economic growth has given a better standard of living with access to healthcare and education, but has caused other social and environmental issues. As rural workers are forced to more urban areas, it stresses the energy and transportation systems and results in a degraded air, water, and soil quality. India is just a very overpopulated, probably the most densely populated country in general, which has made the infrastructure that supports things like education and health systems stressed. And again, they're seeing a lot more people move to the urban areas where work and more opportunity are. Another issue in Asia is the over-harvesting of timber. which is affecting the economy and the carbon budget of the world. In 2020, it shrunk by 81.5 million acres, and by 2020, an additional 16 million acres. This resulted in 8.72 gigatons of carbon being emitted into the atmosphere. This is having a harsh effect on Indonesia's lowland tropical forest, and it's decreasing production of the wood industry, which is harming their economy as well. The Pacific Islands, they are also being affected by climate change. Global warming and increased ocean temperatures are causing rising sea levels, and portions of some of the smaller islands are literally disappearing. Along with that, erosion of the coastal land and infrastructure, more frequent and severe cyclones, increased rainfall, and flooding in some areas, while drought in the others. Also in these areas, there's what's called the youth bulge, which means it's a disproportionately young population. This could either be positive for growth and development and innovation, or it could be a catalyst for crime and violence. And unfortunately, they have a large number of unemployment, again, for those young people. Overall, their infrastructure just isn't very stable. And sadly, another issue for these areas is some socioeconomic issues. Very high rates of violence against women, which are also known to be grossly underreported. So the already higher rates are likely even higher in reality. Also, these areas, many of these areas are known to be excluding women, elderly, and disabled with higher rates of inequality. As mentioned before, in some of the areas, only members of chiefdom can vote or run for election. Some future goals of the areas. For Asia, sustainable forest practices to help combat the degradation and improve the economy, support the economic and population growth by improving infrastructures, and maintaining relationship over territory and with other religions. For the Pacific Islands, advancing the region's digital infrastructure and innovation. These areas are kind of isolated and slower to develop. Develop a sustainable marine resources to help with the global warming issues, and establish food dietary guidelines and address food insecurities. Again, these areas are hard to get to. These are references.